and welcome to the Essential Property Podcast with your hosts, Paul Samuda and Amanda Woodward. With 45 years of combined experience in the world of property buying, selling, investing and developing, they are here to share with you their knowledge in the Stoke-on-Trent, Newcastle Under Lyme and Crewe property market. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Essential Property Podcast, where we discuss all things property related within Crewe, Stoke and Newcastle areas of the country. My name is Amanda Woodward and I'm pleased to have with me Karishma Davdra and Salik Rashid, who are both successful property investors and developers based in Cheshire. In this property developer special, Karishma and Salik share their commercial to residential strategy along with the success and challenges along the way. So welcome Salik and welcome Karishma.
Hi Amanda.
Hi Amanda.
Hi guys, really good to have you on the podcast. So we're doing a special in and around development and properties that are being converted to residential property from commercial. And I know that you guys have some great experience in that department. So I'm really excited to ask you some questions and share with our listeners, those that are interested in that particular strategy across the country, but more specifically in and around Crewe, Stoke and Newcastle Under Lyme. But just to give our listeners a feel for who you guys are, if you could just kick off with a little bit of an intro, a little bit about your background and ultimately what was your motivation to move into property investment and property development?
Hi guys, thank you for having us, Amanda. Really happy to be on. So a bit about me first. So why I got into property was mainly because I wanted to start a business. I've always been a little bit business-minded. Although I went to university and got a degree in accounting and finance, I genuinely deep down wanted to do something in business and probably kind of fell under my lap, actually, a little bit while thinking about it, but also while Karishma, who took me to a seminar which got my juices flowing. And that's why I chose to do property. It was something that allowed me to, build a business and build assets at the same time. So it helped me to understand how to build a business and make profit at the same time.
Good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm just going to follow on from what Salik was saying there. So it's kind of similar in terms of the motivation behind it. I wanted to get into property simply because I wanted to do things differently to what I'd seen my parents do. Same thing. So I went to university, got a degree, and then really struggled to get a job, which kind of really demotivated me and then made me realize that actually, why am I putting myself through all this stress, trying to get a job and being rejected? And also, during that time, I also realized that working for someone else was quite hard. I was basically growing their business. So alongside working in corporate life, I was also working with Salik and we were building the property business, which was quite an eye-opener, and I could see light at the end of the tunnel. It made me realize that actually this is not, the corporate life wasn't going to be for the rest of my life. It was a bridge to kind of get me to where I wanted to be in terms of property and then transition out. And we had a plan, and I didn't have to kind of work my way up the ladder and grow my income that way. So same thing with Salik, what Salik said, like building income and assets. And property was always something that my parents said, is a good investment. Like it's, buy your first house, but I never kind of understood how to do it or where to start. So I ended up going on like a property training course. And then from the back of that, we kind of built our portfolio and here we are today.
Fantastic. That's a great intro, guys. So fast forward a couple of years, you got into property, you started looking around, one would assume, the whole of the UK in terms of where's our first deal going to be or where's our investment area going to be. So how did Crewe and Stoke come to the table?
So yeah, we visited quite a few places. I think off the top of my head, we went to Leicester, Reading, Coventry, West Bromwich, Dudley, quite a number of places. But what I found about property is you need to surround yourself with people that really know what they're doing, especially at the beginning, and build yourself a good team. So off the back of the training that we did, we found that we connected with quite a few good people and eventually ran into actually yourself, Amanda, and Paul Samuda, who showed us around Stoke-on-Trent very kindly and allowed us to kind of get a good feel of the place. And that gave us comfortability to kind of, set ourselves a goal to kind of start building a portfolio there.
Just to add on to the back of what Salik said, so the numbers for us worked in that area as well. And what I mean by that is when we started out, Salik was in the property business full time, and then I was working still full time. So like our mortgageability and access to finance was kind of restricted to our circumstances then. But, investing in Stoke on Trent and Crewe and that sort of area, the numbers in terms of lending and the value of the houses kind of stacked up. So that's why we kind of stayed in that area. And also we had people that we could reach out to, like yourself and Paul, if we needed advice or support, or if we weren't quite sure about something, because you were more experienced in that area than we were when we were starting out.
Yeah, I remember that around about 6 years or so ago. And we invested in the area for very similar reasons. The numbers worked, the numbers stacked up, and they still do today. And we see it as a great investment area, both Stoke and Crewe, for a number of different strategies. I'd be interested just to hear in terms of when you first came to Stoke and Crewe, you had a look around, you had a look at what some other people were doing as well. What was the initial strategy? Did you follow that? And what did you end up doing for your first few years in the area?
So for us, like I explained, Salik was in the property business full time. So we only had literally one source of income, which was me. So for us, building that cash flow and building a higher cash flow pot or figure, should I say, was quite important. So we went straight into HMOs, and that was our strategy. So we wanted enough income coming in from the property side of the business as well, so that it could replace Salik's expenses as quickly as possible. So that's kind of what we started off with.
My expenses. I think it was our expenses.
Our expenses.
I think that sounds like quite a nice strategy. If I had somebody building a business to replace my expenses, that sounds fantastic, Salik. No, I totally understand. So I think it's fair to say that HMOs in and around Stoke and Crewe have had a bit of a journey of themselves over the last few years. So how did you find that strategy initially? How has it worked today? Just give us, our listeners, sort of an idea of how you have found investing in HMOs in the area.
I think initially when we started, there was a lot less regulations and the purchase price weren't as bad because not as many people were looking into it. Whereas at the moment, the market has moved on and it's a lot more competitive. Things like HS2 has brought a lot more investors from down south up, and that's increased the competition. But we see it as a positive, really. Even though it's pushed up prices, it's made us make a better product for tenants.
Yep.
So I think initially we had products which we would not be happy with having now, but we've developed them and we've added on to newer projects where we're providing a better service for our tenants. And I think generally they are happier with that kind of level of service. And along with that, the prices that we've charged has gone up as well. So initially we didn't have en-suites and now we do. And that's something that people do like because, sanity is something that people do look for. And if they can have their own bathroom, it's peace of mind kind of thing for them. And they're more than happy sharing kitchens usually, as long as we have a system to get them cleaned on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Yes. So, just to expand on what Salik said, I don't think like the properties have changed, but the level of service that you provide to the tenants and just the finish. So it's not really like the structure or the layout. It's more like the colour of the walls and like the actual soft furnishings, all of that sort of like the appeal and the look. It's a bit more, you have to dress it a little bit more so that you attract the right type of tenant, the right type of rent that you're looking for, because people are willing to pay a little bit more if the product is that little bit nicer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what Salik was saying about regulations in terms of since 2018, we've gone from no licenses to licensing. In Crewe, we've gone from no Article 4 now to Article 4. We've just had general nationwide improvements when it comes to energy performance, electrical certification, just everything is just moving up. And as you say, that's great because it builds just a better experience for the tenants in the houses. Of course, we can, increase our rents with regards to that. And I know you guys, I think when we first met, it was like, we love HMOs. And then a few years after, it was like, I think we're done with HMOs. And now it's like, we love HMOs again. So I think we go through cycles in terms of the market. And that's just the market that we're in. We have peaks and troughs. We have, high demand times. We have like lulls. But I think looking over the last 6 years, generally, I think we've all fared pretty well with our HMO portfolios. So that's obviously worked very, very well for you guys. And then you've moved on to other developments, or you've started to bring in other strategies to your business in and around the commercial to residential conversions, which is really exciting, and the theme of the podcast today. So just share with us a little bit about how you sort of transitioned into that and why you decided to go down that road.
So I think we sat down and we evaluated where we were in terms of our portfolio. And when we looked at our property portfolio, it was very skewed towards HMOs. And we did regret at the beginning actually not going into more buy-to-lets, because we kind of almost viewed every property as a HMO, possibly missing out on quite a few opportunities, turning them into quick buy-to-lets. So what we did, we ended up selling some properties that didn't quite work for us or didn't quite fit our needs, and reused that capital into going into commercial conversions. And the reason we went into commercial conversions mainly was because even though the process is a lot longer and a lot more difficult, it allowed you to get multiple of buy-to-lets into one property rather than doing 6-7 deals at the same time and getting the same amount of units.
Yeah, so it was basically just trying to bulk buy, but it was difficult to bulk buy and also get a BMV or get a property where we could add value and make the numbers work. So if we did commercial to residential conversion, we could get those numbers and those ROIs to stack up and would still end up with the same outcome in terms of 6 buy-to-lets, let's say, for example. So that was kind of the idea behind it.
Okay, I like that, because I think buy-to-lets are, they are the little soldiers in the portfolio, aren't they? That just sit there quietly. And if you're doing that in bulk, I think that sounds like a good strategy. That was the plan on paper. That was the strategy. So has that worked out? And what was the first step? What was the first deal like? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'd say it's worked out really well for us, actually. We've worked alongside a coach who's basically helped us along the way. And that was really vital for us, because it allowed us and gave us the confidence to go into deals like that. Because there are a lot more pitfalls when you go up into the commercial conversion strategy, for sure.
So, I think it's worked really well. So we've done 2 commercial conversions, and from both of those, we've created 11 units, and I see them as 11 buy-to-lets, essentially. So it's 11 flats. So instead of going out buying 11 buy-to-lets, we've just done it in bulk. And we've finished both of them now, and they've both been letted out now, and we've actually let them out on long leases. But moving from like HMOs to commercial to residential, you're kind of relearning everything again, because everything is completely different. Refurb's different. The way you calculate your numbers is different. The cost of the refurb is different. The materials, the teams that you work with. So we had to kind of re-educate ourselves and learn everything from scratch again. Funnily enough, we did 2 conversions, and the second one, which we agreed, was completed before the first one that we agreed, because we were still learning lots from the first one. But we can go into a little bit more detail about all of that if you want us to.
Sure. So I know for sure one of them was in Crewe. Perhaps tell us a little bit about the Crewe one initially and how that worked out.
Yeah, Karishma found that deal, as she finds most of our deals. She's very much front-loaded in our business. And this one's actually on Nantwich Road, which is one of the main roads in Crewe. It's an old office building that was on the market for, I believe, £185,000 initially. The offer we put in was 150. We were thinking about either turning it to HMO, and that would be like 10 different rooms, or converting into flats. But we did want to go down the flat route, really. Our offer actually didn't get accepted, and someone else had come in and put a higher offer in, and away they went. I think it was a year later that it came back onto the market. Yeah.
A year later, and 2 sales fallen through.
Wow.
That was for a variety of reasons, but we went back. We went in, had to look at the property. The agent had remembered us, and then we went in and we put in two offers. Because it was a year later and we were confirmed in our strategy of flats, we wanted to show them that we knew what we were doing. And we said, we can put in an offer of £150,000 if we can convert it into 6 flats, or we'll offer you 125 if we convert it into 5 flats. And they were actually really happy with that. So we went away, we did our work with the architect and established that the maximum we could get would be 5 flats, and offered them £125,000, and that was accepted.
And so that was accepted. And because it was an office, we didn't have to put in full planning app. We just had to do PD. So the costs were reduced and the time frame of getting it approved was also reduced. The previous people that were trying to buy the property and then it had fallen through for whatever reason, they had already put in a PD app for, I think it was 5 apartments, but it was a completely different layout, didn't work for us. So we knew that, you know, it would be accepted on our different layout, and then we were happy with that. So the offer was accepted and away we went. And then we were about to complete. So there was lots of delays from the vendor's side in terms of like the solicitor process and the conveyancing. We were about to complete and then lockdown hit. It was just the beginning of COVID. And there was quite a lot of uncertainties. We didn't really know where we stood in terms of would we be holding this property for a year before we can get builders in. We didn't know. It was just the beginning of the lockdown. So we just went back to them because we were cash buyers. We went back to the vendors and said, look, we're happy to still proceed on this, but you'd have to kind of give us 3 to 6 months until we know what's going on before we complete. And they said, you know, that's too long, can't wait that long. And I said, okay, fine, we'll complete now, but we'll only be able to complete at 100 grand. And I need to keep an extra, you know, contingency pot in case I need to pay for whatever it is. And they were happy with that. So we actually ended up buying it for 100 grand.
I mean, that is an absolute steal. You stole that property. No, that's like a fantastic deal.
Yeah, we get told that a lot. We got a really good price on that. And it's just basically the circumstances and being there at the right time. And it was genuine. Like, we were happy to pay the 125 if they waited a little bit longer, but they didn't want to wait. So yeah, we bought it for 100 and then we had planning submitted straight away. And within 56 days it was, we had it approved in PD under 56 days. And then we had a build team ready to go to start. And yeah, Salik took over from there.
Yeah, so a little bit about psychology, why I think the offer was accepted at £100,000, because business owners generally, they don't want to be paying business rates on an empty property. They don't want to be paying bills and all of that stuff, having maintained a property. The other thing is they've moved out of the premises for a reason. They want to carry on that business, but they want to focus on that. They don't want to have that lingering on. So I think that's why they actually ended up saying, you know what, just take the property off our hands. We won't have any costs on it, and we can move on and you can move on. So there are opportunities out there definitely for that kind of strategy for people that are looking for that, for sure.
And I think you were definitely a little bit of trailblazers in that department, because I think since your development, which is a lovely development, I drive past it all the time and always have a little look. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I always like to just have a little look at the front door. And at Salik and Karishma's development there's probably been about 4 or 5 other very nice developments that have taken place, flat developments on Nantwich Road as well. And it's really lifted the road. Not that it wasn't a nice road, it's like the main road coming down from the station in Crewe, but it has just really lifted all these different developments. Everyone's done like a really good job. So I think that's great for any high street, because as we know, the high streets are not having an amazing time at the moment. So we've got some nice commercial, and then in and around that we've got dotted some really nice residential as well. So we've definitely done a great job in that department. So let's talk about Salik's favourite subject, and also my favourite subject, which is builders.
Yay.
Going into a flat conversion, obviously you said you had started the other one, so builders aren't new to you, developments certainly aren't new to you, but what is different when you are going for that first sort of small commercial conversion?
So I think for a small conversion especially, you definitely want a builder that's done it before and been there, and you can see their product, because what goes into a development is completely different to what goes into a refurbishment. There's regulations involved, so building control get involved that need to make sure that X, Y, and Z is done before they can sign it off. They work very closely with the builder to make sure, you know, it's fire safe and things are constructed in the right manner. The architect is involved because things do change as the building goes along. There will be things that crop up, and you may need to adjust a few things which happened in this development. And also there's something called PCC sign-off, which we need to get for our mortgage provider to make sure that, it's mortgageable and what we've done is actually what we said we would do. It's actually very similar to building control, but it has to be done by an independent person. So it could be an architect, but this one was actually done by an engineer that we worked with closely. Actually, no, the Nantwich one, we did it with the architect.
Yeah.
Done. But yeah, going back to builders, it's definitely someone that's been there and done it before. We'd actually gone to his development that he was just finishing, and he showed us around very happily. And this is something he was doing quite regularly in and around the Stoke and Crewe area. So we felt comfortable around that. And also he had a team behind the scenes for any admin work, for if there was any problems, we could email, or if there was any invoices that they were due, that they would be following up, which meant that was kept on the side and he didn't have to deal with that. And that keeps his mind clearer to get on with the job. He also has a number of tradesmen within his business. So it's not contractors that he brings in, it's within his business that he will rely upon to do a lot of the works, for sure. That allows us a lot more confidence to basically know that the work will be of high standards and it will go from A to Z a lot more free-flowingly than maybe a refurbishment where contractors come in sparingly sometimes when they can make it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, obviously the recommendation came from you and Paul, so we knew that he was a good builder in his quality and level of work. Yeah. And even though he'd done a slightly different project for you guys, for the builder himself did what we were doing day in, day out for himself. Yeah. So he was already delivering what we wanted for himself, and we went to see one of his own projects. So it was great to get someone like that on board with that experience. I don't know about you, Salik, but I felt that working with a build team on a commercial level, this sort of level, it's more of a breeze. I don't know why, but it was pretty much, we handed them the keys in the morning, and then we went in later that afternoon, and the property was already being stripped out. It was pretty much looking very different. Things were moving quicker than we could inspect, which is very different to small HMO conversions. The speed of work and the number of people in the team is completely different. It's a different scale, I think.
Yeah, he goes off the back of the architectures and building control drawings for sure, which help him. And when he needs to ask us questions, he would certainly ask us questions in terms of, towards the end, it was about where sockets are going and if things were being adjusted in terms of the showers. But as Karishma said, the speed of work was a lot quicker from his side, which was a good, smooth transaction.
There's less involvement than when you're trying to manage a HMO and different contractors. I thought it was easier and less stress.
That sounds good. And I would concur in terms of when you improve the level of your team, you do have a much better experience. There's always that issue, isn't there, in terms of cost, in terms of getting the right guys in, and sometimes the projects just don't quite allow for it. But I think we've both found there's someone who can mix the good service alongside a competitive price, which can be rare. So I think we definitely found a gem there. That's not always the case, though, as I know, as you guys know. And you said you wouldn't mind sharing a scenario which was slightly different. And we'd love to know how you overcame some challenges in the builder department on a similar, or actually I think slightly larger project.
Yeah, so as Karishma mentioned previously, we'd actually already purchased a pub. This wasn't in the Wrexham, this wasn't in the Crewe area. It was actually in a town called Wrexham. And what had happened is basically we'd found a builder, which we were initially very happy with. We'd established the refurb and the costs that were involved. But what was going in the background, the builder that we were talking to was part of a business in a trio. And unfortunately, they weren't getting on the background. And from our understanding, one of them was stifling resources away from her business, which basically made the business insufficient in terms of the building firm. We didn't know about any of this until, I'd say, 6 weeks into the project. And that then initially came out. The director found out about that and then started contacting us. And what was a red light moment for us was when the director was chasing us for money when works hadn't been done. And that was like a light bulb moment. Hold on a minute, something's not quite right here. And what happened is basically they'd split ways and the company had started going into liquidation. So unfortunately, we got drawn into that. And that wasn't the most pleasant experience that we'd had. That's partly why that project took a lot longer.
Yeah, and on the back of that, we did, lose a chunk of cash and money because we had paid the first tranche up front because of the materials, and that's what the agreement we had with them, because they couldn't support the cash flow of the project. So, I mean, looking back at it, there were red lighters, there were, gut instincts, which we didn't follow. And now we know that actually things have to be on our terms. If we're not comfortable with it, we don't agree to it. And if it doesn't work for us, then we just walk away. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a very expensive lesson that we learned there. But we did turn it around and found another builder, another project manager, and they took it on. And there was a lot of work that had to be undone. They created more mess at the property. And this project was completely different to the one that we did in Crewe, because the Crewe project was pretty much using the existing building as it was and just creating internal walls. Not much structural changes, a few, but not a load. And in the pub, we had a lot of structural changes going on. So it was pretty much kind of bringing it back to bare four walls and then kind of building up the internal structure all over again. So there was a lot more work. Then that took a little bit longer. And then we were starting that refurb in the middle of the pandemic. And it just took a little bit longer, but we just kind of went with it and we didn't rush it. We took our time with it and we got it over the line. And it's now fully rented on a 5-year lease with the council, and it's occupied and it's, worked out all well. And we've just had a valuation on it, and the valuation that came back on the property was significantly higher than what we anticipated when we actually purchased the property. Now, it's taken us quite a long time to get it to where it is now. So we bought the property in 2018, but there was significant delays with planning because this one actually went to committee and it wasn't a PD. So it had to go to planning and then it went to committee, which took quite some time in itself. And then we had the whole fiasco with, the builders kind of going into liquidation and then hitting the pandemic and then trying to find a new builder in the pandemic to kind of take over. But full circle, we're pretty much going to be refinancing and pulling out most of our money, including that chunk that we lost. So it's worked out. It's all worked out.
Look, that's good news to hear in the end. And I think anyone who is brave enough to try new strategies and do new things and take on more risk to get more rewards, it's just part of being in business. So I think you've been really transparent in that department. And then obviously you've got property number 2 that's worked sort of exceedingly well. And onwards from there, I think you mentioned there was another little small commercial deal that worked out quite well, also in Crewe. So I'd like to hear about that one as it's in Crewe.
So this was a ground floor building, just the shop bit. I think originally it was a milkshake place, and before that it was a post office. So I'd gone through a few different retailers and probably not worked that well. It's located on a residential area as well, so it's very few commercial places that would actually work there. So we'd actually bought it because it was so long to convert it into 2 different separate flats. Bought it again unconditional. As you can probably see, there's a theme here. We're very risky, and we do buy things without getting planning on them. But anyway, we went into this for 2 flats, 1 studio and 1 bedroom. And it fitted perfectly. And because it had been a commercial, we thought it'd fly through because there'd be less traffic because of 2 flats rather than a commercial building. But there was some objections along with so one of the objections was overdevelopment. And I think there was something about parking and what's the space outside?
Amenity space.
Because of that, the council had come back and refused the 2 flats. We went back to the architect, had a good think about it, and then put it in for planning again for 1 flat. We do always have second exit in our deals that we go into, and this was the second exit. even though we wouldn't pull out as much money and we would cash flow less, it still worked for us in terms of our ROI. So going forward, we were umming and ahhing about this, and because of the market had moved on so much, we thought, let's try it and sell the property. I think we initially bought it for £50,000 with a few buying costs here and there, and we'd agreed to sell it for £70,000. And we were chuffed with that. Well, I was chuffed with that anyway. I thought, a quick buck, and we'd move on, use that capital again into another development. But Karishma, she works very closely with some people in a different industry, which I'll let her talk about.
I'm not sure if this is the right platform to share all of that on, but anyway, so I guess it's like a business coach, and she basically told me that I should look at other opportunities with this property and maybe reconsider our options and not sell this. So we held out a little while, and then an opportunity kind of came about itself. So the flats that we were talking about up the road on Nantwich Road, a charity had taken them on. But when we were in initial discussions with them, they were talking about converting the top 2 flats on the first floor within that building into their office space. And then we were umming and ahhing, and then I wasn't really comfortable with that, because then we'd have to go through the change of use class and all of that, which was just more paperwork, additional faff. And then if they were to leave the premises at any point, we'd have to convert it back to resi. And it was just a faff. And I was just like, this doesn't feel right. However, I've got another commercial unit up the road, which hasn't been converted yet. So do you want to have a look at that? And maybe you can use that as offices. They had a look at it, they loved it, and then they took it. So it all worked out. And we didn't convert it into flats, and we left it as it is. So the refurb was quite minimal. I'll let Salik share the numbers behind that, because that's his department. But it all worked out. They've taken it on a long lease, the same sort of lease that they've taken the building of the flats on for. And now they've got a base and they're happy with it, and it cash flows great. So Salik will talk you through the numbers.
Yeah, in total, I'd say we probably spent £6,000 on the whole refurbishment of the building. It's now a office building, which they really enjoy. I went in there the other day because we need to get measurements for it. And there's about 6 or 7 of them loving it because they finally got a base to actually work from. And because they've grown into this area, they've got a place to go to actually navigate, talk, communicate, brainstorm, bring clients in, and all that. And that's really vital for them to have the cash. So they've actually rented it on a higher than market value. We were offered, when we were holding it, we were actually being asked to rent it to other individuals, and they were asking for about $550 per calendar month. The charity is actually, because we converted it for them for the specific needs, they've rented it from us for £800. And yeah, it's amazing. And in a commercial building, we don't have to do as much as a residential building, which allows us a lot more hands off. So all we have in the property is about £55,000, maybe £56,000 of our money. 50,000 is angel money, which we're giving them a monthly return for. And the remainder is just our funds that we've built up over a period of time. And we are happy to keep that in. And after costs all in, we're probably cash flowing just about £650. So £650 from a property that is, £55,000. You can work out the ROI on that, but it's
the same cash flow or similar cash flow that we would have got from 2 flats.
Good. So it all worked out in the end.
It all worked out in the end.
I think it's actually higher than what we would have got from 2 flats, and probably a small HMO without the hassle of what HMOs can sometimes bring.
Good stuff. So you spoke a lot about the council there. So was a long-term lease with the council, social housing providers, was that always part of your strategy from the get-go?
So with the one that we did in Wrexham, yes. After the development had started, I was already in early conversations with a different provider, not the one that's already taken it. It was a different provider. So that was the plan for that one. And then for the one in Crewe, I was, actively hunting, doing the refurb for someone to take it on a long-term lease, but I was just struggling to find anyone, or there was not many people kind of responding. And then this provider was actually introduced to us by our builder. Yeah, so it all worked out in that sense. But yeah, the initial plan was to kind of try and make it as hands-off as possible. So long lease contracts was kind of what we were looking for. And if we didn't get that, that was fine as well, because the private sector was very busy as well. And we did kind of do like a viewing day, because we weren't sure which way to go, and we wanted to make sure like the demand was there as well. And we had a lot of interest on the private sector as well. So either way, it worked out, and it was going to be a winner either way, which way we took. So we just decided to kind of go with the hands-off approach.
Yeah, so I'll just add to that. What Karishma probably hasn't highlighted as much as the persistence that she had to actually find these providers and working with the council. Karishma had already contacted the provider that the builder had recommended, but they hadn't come back to us, along with a number of others. And through persistence, she finally got to the right person, which she could engage with, have a conversation with, and then move on from there. And again, with the council, it was a lot of back and forth. And although we had the option to do a private rental with individuals, we wanted to work with specific companies and groups of people, which just meant that we could give it to one company or business or the council, which meant we had one tenant effectively. But also it allowed us to kind of grow our business if we wanted to, pass them on more properties and more and grow our business really in that way.
Yeah, and just to add to that, working or trying to secure contracts with these people requires a lot of patience, like a lot of patience. Because they're really slow, and there's lots of there's lots of red tape that this person needs to sign it off and that person needs to sign it off, and it's always another week and you've got to kind of look at the long term rather than the short term. Yes, we had the properties empty for about 6 to 8 weeks, and we could have had them rented straight away, or we waited and kind of had a longer term contract. And also to add to that, looking at long lease contracts on any type of property, you're quite limited to lending as well, because you have to get specialized lending. So that's kind of like a factor to consider as well, in terms of, are you willing to kind of jump through all those hoops on the back end for your lending as well? So just kind of have that at the back of your mind and, make an informed decision based on all that information.
So I've got a question for you. You're a few commercial conversions in, a few stories along the way, but generally a good successful start in that strategy. So if a building comes along and it's big enough for 15 flats, 20 flats, 25 flats, would that be something that would excite you and you'd go for? What's next in terms of this strategy for you guys?
We might have different answers on this.
I think what I'll go back to is, if you've done a conversion, if it's 5 flats, 10 flats, it's fairly similar with a few more additional kind of difficulties. But if something came along and it was 20, 25 flats, it wouldn't deter me at all. Because at the end of the day, you're project managing one unit, one set of architect team, one set of building firm, and it allows you to kind of focus on that one project rather than maybe 2 or 3. Which means you spread your time more, which means you have more, problems going forward with that. So I wouldn't be too deterred by it.
Karishma?
So for me, it depends, because you have this thing called small developments and large developments, and then a charge comes in place, which is called SIL, is it the community infrastructure levy? Yeah. So, and that's dependent directly on the size of the development. So, and that's a new thing, because the developments that we've done so far have been under that. So we've not had to kind of worry about that or think about that. So that's another additional thing to kind of think about. So the 25 flat development, I'm not too sure whether I'd kind of jump at it, but I'll certainly look at anything within the smaller development, the upper limit, which I think it's 9. Is it 9?
Yeah.
9. So I would kind of consider it up to there. And yeah, we are still looking for more commercial conversion, because it's bulk buying. So instead of looking at multiple, it's just easier to do that. And it's easier to kind of secure these types of deals in comparison to a buy-to-let in this market.
Yeah. And I think as I'm driving around Stoke and I'm driving around Crewe, especially in this sort of post-pandemic market, there's some very interesting opportunities that are arising in terms of certain buildings that are no longer occupied or no longer going to be occupied, where this strategy works quite nicely. The government are obviously pushing the development of old commercial into residential and bringing in, or have brought in, or say they have brought in. I'm yet to see in Stoke-on-Trent, to be honest, any sort of relatively straightforward planning applications. But the idea is that planning becomes a little easier to start to regenerate some of these old commercial buildings into residential. Some parts of the UK, there is funding for that. I know you guys had a good little funding opportunity in Wrexham because the local authority were looking to help small developers with that. Stoke-on-Trent, as I said on the last podcast, £56 million is coming into Stoke-on-Trent as part of the Levelling Up Fund. So there's a lot of opportunity out there for this strategy. And any of our listeners that are active in the area and are finding deals of this sort of strategy, will share your details at the end, so they can certainly get in touch as you guys are ready to go and looking to build your portfolio more and more and more. So I think one of my final questions for you guys is, if somebody's listening to the podcast, let's say they've got a buy-to-let portfolio, or they've done a few HMOs and they're, thinking about, maybe I should develop a couple of flats or maybe 4 to 6 flats. Any initial tips for them or guidance broadly that you would say, make sure that you consider this or consider that?
So for me, I would say get everything started early. So there's a few considerations for when you're doing like a conversion and creating independent dwellings as of such. One being utilities. Like, utilities is something that you need to think about before you even buy the property, because they take absolutely forever, and without that you can't complete, and it will cause loads of delays on your project during the build. So I guess the first thing to think about is, are you going to separate the utilities? And if you are, then start engaging with the relevant providers, whether it's electric, gas, water suppliers, like at an early stage. The caveat to that is they won't really engage with you until you've actually owned the property. They won't engage with you. So just kind of have all of that process set out. The other thing that I would say is, if you're not doing the splitting of utilities, why? Think about that, because that may affect your access to lending on the back end. So if you wanted to sell them as individual units, you might not be able to. If they're not separated out, that means you have to sell it as a freehold block, which means you're limited to who you can sell to, and therefore that may affect the valuation. So also think about that. And also just factor in the cost of separating the utilities, because it's not cheap. And it's very variable, because it depends on where the source needs to be connected to. So if your mains is 10 meters down the road, then they need to run a 10-meter cable, which will cost more than running a 1-meter cable. So I usually budget in around about £1,500 per flat per utility. So kind of think about that as a cost as well, because it's a hidden cost really that people don't think about when they're kind of developing out. So those would be my biggest kind of tips in terms of like, think about this. In terms of the actual build out and the numbers, do you want to just share that calculation that we do?
I'll go back to the tip that I gave at the beginning. This is very much a people business, and you should be wanting to work with people that probably sort of trodden that footpath and that you want to tread. So having done some developments, you want to be thinking about who's done the developments that you want to do, possibly as a JV or possibly as a consulting role or whatever it may be. Having someone that's done those flats would be advisable, I'd say. So you want to get a good team involved, an architect with local planning experience. That's really vital. Knowing the GDV, which is the gross development value, which will be effectively what the whole building will be worth at the end. The cost, as Karishma has talked about, some of having worked with someone else that's done it, allowed us to kind of know what the cost would be going forward, and that just clears our brain to actually get on with the deal and actually just press the button and go, we're happy with that. Let's go. Let's crack on and do it.
One thing that I would like to add is the PCC, or a CML, it's the same thing. And engage with that right at the beginning, because a lot of people don't, and getting it retrospectively is really expensive. So basically, at the end of your conversion, your mortgage lender, if you're refinancing or if you're selling, the mortgage lender of your buyer will ask for this. And if you don't have it, you'll have to get it retrospectively, and it can cost a lot. Similar to building regs, like if you're getting it retrospectively, it will cost a little bit more. So just engage with them straight from the get-go and make sure you get one. It's not always required, but I would recommend, just to make your life easier, even if you don't require it, just get one done.
All right, good stuff. That's some really good tips there. And for anyone who's listening who hasn't done it before, I'm sure they'll be scribbling some notes in terms of some of the things to cover. So look, that's been incredibly useful. I think our listeners would really learn a lot from hearing from you guys who have been relatively new to the strategy but have done a lot in quite a short space of time. Share with us how the listeners can get in touch with you, where they can find you, if they've got deals or just some general communication going forward. How's best to do that, guys?
So we're both on Instagram. Karishma is Karishma Davdra Property, and I am Salik Rashid Property. So if you do want to hit us up, I'd say that's probably the best way to do it. And anything, right, really, if you want to have a discussion about your developments or where you want to take your property journey, some advice here or there about HMOs, conversions, buy-to-lets, yeah, we're open to those kind of ideas. Anyone that wants to really be involved in property.
Or even if they're just kind of looking to source something that they've kind of got, or they're not quite sure what to do with it, we'd be happy to have a look at it. So yeah, just get in touch with us.
I know Salik and Karishma are serial property buyers. So I'm looking to build their portfolio quickly and in volume. So if you do have anything, no doubt they will definitely take a look. But look, guys, that's been incredibly helpful. I've really enjoyed it. Good to see you both, and hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Thanks for having us, Amanda.
Right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if so, please hit subscribe and share with those who you think would enjoy it too. To get in touch with Paul and Amanda directly, please visit their website www.essentialpropertyoptions.co.uk for more information. We look forward to sharing with you on the next episode.